All right, Rizwan. Well, thanks for joining us today. I know we have a lot to talk about today. We've been talking a lot about a lot of different healthcare payers and a lot of the ways that they're trying to modernize their analytics stack, their data stack, and how those payers are using Databricks and AI to really generate proactive insights for their different organizations. So I'll just kick us off right away with the first question. Why, in your opinion, do you think it's important that healthcare companies start to modernize their analytics? And how does AI in general and specifically Databricks Genie, fit into that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart. Healthcare analytics is going through a transformation, and generative AI is accelerating that transformation, but only if the foundation is done right. So, as you ask, great question, right? A modern healthcare payer is dealing with massive, massive amount of clinical claims and operational data sets. Traditional data warehouses can't keep up. So, what Databricks gives you is a unified platform for both engineering and analytics. It's a governed data with Unity Catalog. It's real-time scalable compute. And now with Genie, a large language powered assistant to surface insights more conversationally. But this is the key point. And Genie only works well when your data foundation is clean. Your goal there has trustworthy semantic definitions. Your governance is airtight. The models are trained and validated with your domain context, right? Healthcare data is too nuanced for out-of-the-box answers. Um, yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about, setting up the foundation for configuring Genie. Can you talk a little bit more in depth about what organizations need to do to prepare their data sets to start getting insights out of Genie?
Yeah, that's a really good question. This is where a lot of teams get wrong, in my opinion. Before you enable Genie, you need to have building blocks. You need to have pillars really defined. Um, Really, number one is that you need to have Unity Catalog Foundation. Genie relies on metadata. If the metadata is wrong, if it's incomplete or is inconsistent, Genie will hallucinate. Just like any large language model, you hear about it, right? ChatGPT's hallucination. Genie will misinterpret tables, provide inconsistent answers. So you really need clean table. You really need good column descriptions and context-defined business definitions. For example, you're talking about healthcare, right? So in claims context, what are allowed values, the lineages and context provided. You need to define ownerships and stewards. You really need to define and classify data from PI, PHI perspective. That's a big aspect from a governance perspective. And then you need to define your model and data permissions. Um, After that, we really need to work on your semantic models. You need business-friendly semantic layers on your goal data sets. For example, as we talked about the claims model, right? You need to have paid amounts or allowed amounts or planned liabilities. Those things need to be defined. How are you going to interpret your claim statuses? If the model doesn't understand how pair logic works, Genie won't either. After that, really, number three, you really need to have consistent goal layer modeling. Genie performs best on curated, harmonized data sets. Healthcare payer must have standardized claim header line models, for example, right? Dimensions for your provider, members, benefits, and products. You need to, if you have quality measures in terms of HEDIS and stars, any logical abstractions, thinking through claims, inpatient claims, case episodes calculations, PCP attributions, cost of care, right? Those need to be fully defined. Without this, Genie really pulls insights from fragmented sources, and that's where it can hallucinate and can give you inconsistent results. The fourth this is the more important pillar, governance and access policies, right? Genie is powerful, but without guardrails, costs can explode. A lot of folks don't really understand that aspect, right? You need to have query cost controls, rate limits. You need to define entitlements and personas. You want to be able to monitor your runaway queries, right? It's not that we turn it on and let people ask any questions because it can really run up your compute cost. You need review cycles for the semantic model changes as things happen. Um, so yeah, I think those are some of the pillars and foundations that you really need to make sure that the Genie adoption is successful for your organization.
All right. No, you talked about a lot there, which I think are very important points, especially around cost and governance, right? A lot of organizations, as they look to adopt this, of course, are going to have to get buy-in from their executive leadership team. And so, could you kind of talk about, some of those guardrails and specifics on how that we can, expose the business to all of these great insights, but doing so without, blowing up the bank, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I can dive in. So one of the biggest misconceptions that comes in is that Genie is out of the box capability, right? So you simply turn it on and it's gonna go. But without guardrails, as talked about the cost controls, it can create huge computational runs for your unoptimized queries, right? Users will ask vague questions or prompts that can produce expensive joins. Large language models, as we talked about hallucinations before, it can lead to bad business decisions. It can result in confusions when answers differ day to day. And if you don't have that governance, we talked about it before, or controls from a governance perspective, leakage of sensitive data could happen as well. So just enabling Genie, it's an example I like to use, that enabling Genie is like giving somebody a sports car to drive, but they haven't even learned to drive yet, right? So training and governance are non-negotiable when it comes to Genie.
Okay, I know I like that analogy a lot. That's good. So yeah, I wanted to kind of jump back to another point that you made in the earlier question about driving trustworthy insights, right? You made the mention about and something that we all hear about when talking about AI and the different large language model and dealing with the hallucinations that are inherent with artificial intelligence. So can you kind of talk about how a payer or what the steps that a payer can take to drive more trustworthy insights using Genie?
That's a great question. And that's the crux of it from a foundation perspective. You need a step-by-step enablement process. Let's talk about that at a high level in terms of what that framework might look like for a successful adoption of Genie capability. As we talked about the goal layer and semantic layer, you really need to build, but also certify your goal layer. You need to standardize your pair schemas, document the business logic, validate these calculations with the SMEs, and a really mature organization would have data governance. So having those validations with your stewards, log those things in your Unity catalog. So that sets your foundations. And after that, on top of that, you need to build semantic models that reflect the healthcare reality for your organization, right? So for example, you need to define your claims life cycles. You need to define risk models. If you're looking at provider hierarchies and what are the attribution rules, we've talked about it before, HEDIS measures. So Genie understands best when you give it structured meaning. And once you have done that, really, it's all about defining your business definitions and metadata to really bring that context home. So in Unity Catalog, and I think as mentioned before, every table needs to have description, every column needs to have a definition, as many examples that you can provide to give it full context, create those data expectations, define those quality expectations. Owners and SMEs should be assigned there. All of this is fuel for large language model accuracy. And then, once you have done all those things from a foundation perspective, you really need to train Genie. So you need to be able to provide good Q&A examples. You need to be able to provide, what is a bad example. You need to give it correct interpretations of fields, provide the context about the domain. Genie gets better, with the more context that you can provide and feedback that you can give it. Um, and it doesn't stop there, right? Just like with any implementation, the key aspect is also the validation. So you need to be able to investment in validating Genie responses. Just run it like a UAT phase. SMEs need to be able to review answers. Data engineering team can get involved, look at the query logic, right? Genie's behind the scenes, building up a SQL query based on your context and feedback. So somebody should be looking at it and validating it. Analytics teams need to get involved, right? Validate the definitions and context, and the governance should be there, right? In terms of looking at the data use. Do not skip this step from a validation perspective, because that what would enable a really successful Genie implementation for your organization. And then after you've done all those, you really need to think about production rollout. And we talked about cost controls. We talked about other governance. Really, you need to roll it out with those controls in place. You need to enable auditing. You need to set up those cost protections when it comes to running the queries and runaway queries. You need to monitor who's prompting what. Create those feedback loops, right? Because that's how you continue to make it better. Review on a weekly basis accuracy reports. Genie is not just fired and forget it type of implementation. It needs to be continued to be worked and validated, and it will, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your business trusts the answers that's coming in, going back to those trustful insights, and this will all drive confidence in terms of the results that are coming up. And then finally, really thinking about training and continue to optimizing it and tuning it. This is just an ongoing process. Healthcare evolves, right? There are always new regulations coming in, new lines of businesses getting added up. You're bringing on new providers and new networks. There are new regulatory changes in the healthcare space. So your semantic models and Genie instructions must evolve as the business does.
I like that a lot, and I like the way that you're kind of touching on a lot of the misconceptions that organizations and leaders have when they're trying to implement these systems. We all kind of have gone through, the initial setups with, the personal large language models like ChatGPT or Copilot, and it can be a little distorting when you go into them because it's so easy. You just create an email, create a password, and you can kind of
Yeah.
create a little bit of a customized bot with your own workspace within those large language models. But what would you say, specifically looking at Genie, what are some of the bigger misconceptions that you're seeing when you're going through these implementations that leaders have when they're starting to configure and set up these customized bots?
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking this question, because I don't think we can talk enough about these misconceptions, because it's a new, shiny, exciting thing from a large language model perspective. It's a huge promise that comes with it. But without fully understanding those misconceptions, that's where some of those implementations can suffer. So number one implementation, as I mentioned it throughout this talk, that Genie works out of the box, right? No large language model understands healthcare cost modeling or claims adjudication out of the box. The second misconception is really that it can read any data, raw, bronze, silver. No. I mean, it can read the data, but it shouldn't, right? Because raw data can result in those hallucinations we talked about. Goal there is your trusted, governed master data, standardized data. That's where that drives confidence in terms of the data, and that's what it should use. Another misconception is that it can replace analysts. No, it will definitely accelerate the analytics, but it doesn't replace that institutional knowledge that you have when it comes to the analyst teams. Another misconception that I can think of is that, this comes a lot when we think about a lot of payers trying to implement governance, that it can slow down innovation. It may feel that way, but actually that's what makes Genie safe and compliant and reliable. So it's the most important aspect. Another misconception I can think of is that if the model answers it correctly, that must be right, right? The confidence does not equal correctness, right? You need to make sure we talked about the validation steps. You need to continue to tune it and validate it. And that's the investment that you will make it to make it more self-reliant and consistent with the responses.
I like that a lot. No, and I like hearing, the more work that you guys do up front in structuring the data, making sure the data is clean, the better output that you're going to get, the less hallucinations you're going to get. Right. And I like the point that you made a lot about, it's not going to replace analysts, right? It may streamline, it may be quicker, it may, make self-service more
Yeah,
available for more resources. But having that subject matter expertise and that knowledge on the industry is always going to be something that people and organizations are going to need. Okay, so
absolutely.
I think just kind of final thoughts. I know you have a lot of experience implementing Databricks and Genie inside of organizations. So what would you recommend, leaders and executives at these parent organizations, what should they keep in mind as they're looking or thinking about implementing something like Genie in their organization?
Yeah. Great question. And it's almost like a summation of our conversation today. There are three things that they should really keep in mind, right? Genie is only as good as your data foundation. So invest in that Unity catalog, governance, and goal models first, right? That is your basic steps to make sure that your data it drives confidence and trustworthy analytics and insights. And the point that we keep talking about in this conversation too, right? It does require training and validation. It doesn't work out of the box, just like any clinical model, right? If you wouldn't trust just an unvalidated risk model, don't use an unvalidated large language model either. And at the end of the day, governance and cost controls are essential. We talked about that a lot today. Scaling large language models without governance is like running a hospital without quality checks, right? Um, so when you put all of these things together, Genie becomes an incredible accelerator for your organization for healthcare analytics. It empowers the business users, executives, analysts, clinicians, your operational teams to be able to get trusted insights instantly. This is critical for your business transformation. But just go through the foundation steps right to make sure that it's successful and your business trusts the data and drives quality and trust across the organization.
All right, awesome. All right, well, hey, Rizwan, really, really appreciate you hopping on and talking us through all of your knowledge on Genie and AI and kind of how the landscape of payers is looking. So really appreciate your time and yeah, look forward to talking to you more about other topics later.
Absolutely. Well, pleasure to be here. Thank you for all the insightful questions. Once again, Genie can be transformative for your organization, right? But only when it's implemented with discipline and the right data foundation. Well, thank you for everybody for watching, and please feel free to reach out for any questions about Databricks, large language models, or healthcare analytics modernization efforts. Thank you. You have a good day.
All right, thanks again.